Assessment, when done regularly at the key points during the learning process, helps students understand the concepts or topics. Assessment also can help them process and express their understanding on incredible insights about the concepts and the competencies required to master. Formative assessment in distance learning is challenging but very, very possible. And we still need to check for understanding and provide meaningful feedback.
So for this morning, no, we will be for 30 minutes, no, or less. These are the things that we need to take a look for a moment. The first is we will be identifying the guiding principles of assessment in distance learning. So paano ba natin mas mapalago pa itong assessment natin sa ating mga bata in distance learning? So ano yung mga guiding principles na sinasabi ng policy na kailangan muli nating balikan, no, para mas maintindihan natin kung paano gagawin ang assessment in distance learning. Then we are going to discuss specific provisions of formative assessment in DO31 series of 2020. Okay? Napakakapal po ng DO31 series of 2020. Titingnan lang natin kung ano yung mga specific na provision ng formative assessment. So aasahan natin na sa 2 araw ang pag-uusapan po natin dito ay formative assessment, no? Hindi po natin muna gagalawin yung summative assessment. Ito munang formative assessment because formative assessment is 80%. Formative assessment is 80% of learning. Summative assessment is 10% of learning, in which we are going to assess now what the students have been acquired or have been achieved, no, from the series of activities and from the series of learning inputs. So ang sinusukat natin sa summative ay ang output. Then 10% is a reflective learning, kung saan babalik ang bata doon sa kanyang natutunan, kung paano niya gagamitin at palaguin naman yung kanyang mga natutunan sa mga learning inputs at doon sa mga learning outputs. So napaka-importante po ng formative assessment sa pagkatuto ng ating mga bata, kasi dito po natin makikita kung may natutunan ba ang bata doon sa mga input na binibigay natin. Ang 10% po, which is summative, is we are now measuring the outputs. We are now measuring the learning outcomes. And reflective output is reflective assessment is kung paano ito magagamit ng bata doon sa kanyang buhay, o paano niya palaguin at i-apply na ito doon sa kanyang buhay. And that's at 10%. And later on, we will be sharing insights before the closing of this session on assessment results in the previous school year. Kasi doon tayo hugot para makapag-move tayo towards another means of improvement and innovation. So balikan natin anong nangyari doon sa assessment tong nakaraang taon, at doon tayo ng mga experiences para gagamitin natin so that we can plan better assessment ahead of time. Okay? So, ano nga ba ang assessment in distance learning? Alam natin, napakahirap. Pero ang titingnan natin is ano yung pinaka-practical na assessment in distance learning, lalo na sa modular na pamamaraan. Okay? Marami tayong katanungan, paano natin maigtingin, paano natin mas palaguin, paano natin mas palawakin, paano natin mas strengthen at ma-redefine. So this time, we will be taking a look at one practical strategy of assessment in distance learning, and that our speakers on the next part of the session. So ngayon tingnan muna natin ano ang assessment in distance learning enclosed in DepEd Order number 31 series of 2020. Okay. So ito yung tinatawag nating assessment policy na pagbabatayan natin ng ating mga gawain. So stated in DepEd Order number 8 series of 2015, ito yung mga naunang final policy, no? Ito yung naunang final policy ng ating assessment sa K-12. The DO8 series of 2015 stated that classroom assessment should be used to inform and improve classroom practices and promote learning outcome. So, ang classroom assessment na tinutukoy dito is formative assessment kasi ginagamit ito para mas maunawaan natin kung paano natin i-enhance itong ating mga assessment strategies, assessment methodologies, and assessment mechanism that will result to a very good learning outcome. Okay. Kaya again, tandaan natin, palagi ko itong i-emphasize that 80% of student learning comes from formative assessment. Okay? Mas natutunan ng bata ang ating mga learning inputs mula doon sa formative assessment. Kasi dito natin nakikita kung paano natin baguhin, paano natin bibigyan ng flexible mechanism para mas maintindihan ng bata yung kaniyang mga lesson doon mismo sa kaniyang learning material. And in a distance learning environment, we need to utilize alternative tools and strategies. So yung mga usual natin na mga ginagawa is kailangan nating pag-isipan kung paano natin ito bibigyan ng mas naaangkop na assessment doon sa sinasabi nating modular distance learning, no? Na titingnan natin na itong mga alternative tools and strategies natin for assessment will support our learners, will support ourselves as teachers, and will support their families. So, pag-iisipan natin mamaya, no, while the talks and sessions will be going on, ano ba tong mga alternative tools and strategies natin for assessment na mas nakakatulong sa atin bilang isang guro na hindi na tayo mahihirapan kasi in that one particular assessment that we are designing, it's already practical for the learners and it's also practical for our teachers and it's also practical for their parents to help their learners. So yun yung pinaka-target natin dito. So our outputs later on, no? Our outputs later on which will be presented tomorrow and be evaluated tomorrow will be the one which is considering practicality of assessment in distance learning. Okay. So what are the desired outcomes according to the policy? Sinisiguro that all learners are fairly assessed and graded in the continuation of education during this health crisis. Pag sinasabi po nating fairly assessed, ang konteksto po ng Department of Education at ang konteksto po ng formative assessment is paano natin mabigyan ang bata ng angkop na assessment para sa kanila. Okay? Paano natin mabigyan ng angkop na assessment o practical and applicable assessment ang ating mga bata na naaangkop sa kanilang kapasidad o naaangkop sa kanilang proficiency level. Minsan kasi pag sinasabi nating fair, ibinibigay natin sa bata ang pantay-pantay na uri ng assessment. Ito yung sinasabing one size fits all. Okay? Pag sinasabing one size fits all, isang assessment lang ang ibinibigay sa lahat ng ating mga bata. Pag sinasabi nating fair assessment, ang ibig sabihin po niyan in an assessment methodology and assessment theory is paano natin mabigyan ang bawat bata na magkakaiba-iba ang kanilang proficiency level, iba-iba ang kanilang capacity, iba-iba ang kanilang learning process, iba-iba ang kanilang learning methodology. Okay? Iba-iba ang kanilang comprehension level. So how are we going to give each one of them with appropriate assessment? Pag nagbibigay tayo ng appropriate assessment sa kanila, ibig sabihin ang assessment na yun ay practical doon sa kanilang capacity, and that is the time that we can say we are giving fair assessment. Kasi paano natin pabubuhatin yung isang bata na hindi niya kayang buhatin ng isang bagay dahil napakabigat para sa kanya. So that means it's not fair for him. A formative assessment again is an individualized assessment in context. Okay? Ibig sabihin, bawat isa ay may pagkakataong matuto sila gamit ang iba't ibang pamamaraan ng assessment na angkop para sa kanila. And the next one is kailangan nating ma-emphasize yung learning standards na kailangang ma-attain yun. That is already given, that the competencies must be mastered, set of competencies per quarters and per week must be mastered. But we have to consider all reasonable leniency and considerations for possible difficulties. We are going to look forward. Ano kaya ang mga competency na maaaring mahirap doon sa ating mga bata? Ano itong mga possible competencies na maaaring hindi makuha ng aking mga bata? Then we can provide reasonable leniency. Ang ibig sabihin, kailangan ba tayong mag-extend? Kailangan ba tayong magbigay pa ng kaunting oras para mas makuha ng bata yung competency na yon? Kasi ang tanong what's the purpose of moving when the competency is not yet mastered? Minsan iisipin natin na sana lahat ng bata in this particular week is makukuha na nila yung intended learning outcome. But we have to consider that there are 70% of our learners who belong to the not proficient and below proficient level. At yung 70% na yun ay wag po nating iwanan. So, pag sinasabi natin kailangan nating ma-attain yung learning standards, but we have to provide them reasonable leniency and consideration. Kailangan pa ba nating bigyan ng kaunting oras to extend para makuha yung competency? Dahil nakikita natin that there are possible difficulties dito. Pinaka-practical po na example, hindi nakasubmit ang bata. Ano kaya ang mga factors sa bakit hindi nakasubmit ang bata? Minsan hindi nakasubmit ang bata kasi una, hindi niya naintindihan yung content ng lesson. That's the first thing. Okay? Hindi niya naintindihan yung content ng lesson. Ang isang bata pag hindi niya maintindihan ang content ng lesson, he will not do something about it. Okay? Wala siyang gagawin doon. Kasi paano niya gagawin? Hindi niya naintindihan. Paano rin niya ibalik? Wala siyang nasagutan. Okay. Pangalawa, merong mga bata na ibinalik yung module, walang sagot. Ganun pa rin, bakit walang sagot? Baka walang naintindihan doon sa content. Okay? Baka hindi marunong pala bumasa o marunong bumasa pero nahihirapan sa pagbasa kasi yung comprehension level nila medyo mababa doon mismo sa level of proficiency na hinihingi ng material. Okay? And these are the things that we need to consider with our materials and with our formative assessment. Okay, na zero. Yung ibang mga bata na zero doon sa ating formative assessment. Ang tanong, anong makakatulong sa kanila? Sinong makakatulong makapag-assist sa kanila kung wala namang tao doon sa bahay na mag-a-assist doon sa kanila? So, the first things first na gagawin ng bata, sasagutan lang yung mga tanong, ibabalik doon. Another thing, perfect yung mga bata kahit hindi tayo naniniwala na magiging perfect sila. Kasi what's the fear? Ayaw nilang bumagsak, ayaw nilang ma-zero. So, meron ng answer key doon sa lipunan So, ba't pa ba pahihirapan yung sarili? Meron ng ibinibigay na sagot. So, kukopyahin na lang yung sagot without reading it. Anyway, we will be checking that one and they believe that when those particular activities are correct already, then that is good already. But we have to remember that it's not about the score that it's about the score of the quiz that we are giving that we will base how the student learn. Okay? Ang titingnan natin is ano talaga ang learning gains ng bata dito sa ating mga material. That will be the first thing that we are going to talk about. No? At marami tayong pag-uusapan na mas maintindihan natin mamaya bakit ito ang naging konsepto na nabuo sa pag-iisip ng ating mga bata at bakit ito ang psychological concept ngayon ng ating mga magulang. Na hindi sila natatakot na walang matutunan ang bata, mas matatakot sila na nababagsak yung bata. Kaya the least that they can do is to cheat. Okay? Is to cheat because we are giving them the possibilities to cheat. Okay? At yun yung naiintindihan nila ngayon. So mamaya is intindihin natin yung psychological concept ng bata at yung magulang para ma-lessen natin ang tendency na students are just copying the answer keys. Okay. So what are the teacher responsibilities now? At bakit natin ginagawa ang webinar na ito? Number one is we will set up mechanisms to monitor and record progress remotely. Okay, kailangan nating makapag-establish ng mga proseso na ma-monitor natin at ma-record natin yung totoong progress ng bata kahit nasa distance learning. Okay? So, Yung isa na pag-uusapan natin, isang mechanism na i-set up natin is yung formative feedback. Okay? So merong mga iba't ibang mga pamamaraan gamitin natin mamaya yung isa sa mga pinaka-practical, but we will allow you also to set your mechanisms in monitoring and recording progress. Then pangalawa is to give timely and constructive and relevant feedback. Pag sinasabi nating timely, agad-agad nabibigyan ang bata ng feedback. Sa distance learning, napakahirap magbigay ng timely feedback. Pero merong mga pamamaraan kung maaring magawa natin ito, no? Timely, constructive, and relevant. Pag sinasabi kasing timely, binibigay ang feedback doon sa learning time. Pag sinasabi nating learning time ng bata, ito yung time na pre-process ng bata ang mga gawain mismo doon sa learning material. Kailan ang learning time ng bata? Monday and Friday. Okay? The moment we are distributing the module, and the moment the student will receive the module and take a look at the module and answer the questions or activities in the module, that is the learning time. And during that learning time, kailangan timely ang pagbibigay natin ng feedback. Okay? And it should be also constructive. Pag sinasabi natin constructive, that will help the student to learn better with the material. And when we say relevant feedback, okay? When we say relevant feedback, nagagamit ng bata outright. Okay, ngayon, kung hihintayin pa natin ng isang linggo bago tayo magbigay ng feedback sa bata, hindi na yun timely at hindi na yun relevant. Kasi hindi na niya yun gagamitin because on the following week there are other modules na kailangan na naman niyang sagutin. So ang ibig sabihin, yung feedback natin for the past week is panis na yun para sa bata. Hindi na yun relevant para sa kanya at hindi na niya yun iisipin kasi ang iisipin niya ngayon is itong bagong module on this particular learning time. Okay? So, dapat ang material natin, ito yung gagawin natin, ang material natin mismo ay nagbibigay na ng timely, constructive, and relevant feedback doon sa bata habang ginagawa niya ang kaniyang lesson within the learning span and within the learning time. And we will also facilitate remediation for learners who need further guidance. Sino ba yung mga bata na struggling natin doon sa ating klase? Yun yung uunahin natin kasi sila yung nangangailangan ng feedback, ng assistance. Okay? So we have to remember that formative assessment in distance learning is about getting better, so it should be specific, frequent, repetitive, and free from restrictions of grading. Itong ibig kong sabihin, wag sanang matakot ang ating mga bata na pag hindi sila nakasagot doon sa ating mga learning modules ay hindi sila matatakot na mababagsak. Okay? Yun kasi ang isang negative psychological impact bata. Pag hindi niya nasagot ng tama ang lahat ng gawain doon sa kanyang modules, meron siyang takot na mababagsak siya. Our module should be very friendly for our learners, friendly that it will allow the students to commit mistakes and errors. Because from that mistakes and errors, that is the starting point of their learning. Okay. When they anticipate that they have to get all the answers correctly, then there is no learning with that. Anong nai-instill sa bata? Yung fear of losing. Okay? When they instill psychologically in their mind, in their young minds, the fear of losing, then they will not eventually learn. Kasi sa bawat module, ang tinitingnan nila is takot na mababagsak sila. Dapat ang mukha ng module, ang psychological acceptance ng bawat bata doon sa module at ang bawat psychological acceptance ng bawat magulang doon sa module is, this module helped me to learn. And it's okay to make mistakes and errors because these mistakes and errors will help me grow and will help me learn better in the lesson. So yun sana yung ma-communicate ng ating mga learning modules. And that is how we are going to improve it now, no, on these 2 days engagement. Na yung module natin ay hindi magmumukhang summative test. Itong module natin ay hindi magmumukhang summative exam na takot sila na pag hindi nila nasagot ng tama ang mga activities ay maaring babagsak sila. Okay? So, in conducting assessment remotely, we need to ensure that we communicate the assessment task. Okay? Teachers must ensure that the following details are well explained to our parents and eventually to our learners. Una, the objective of the assessment task. Okay? Ano ba ang inaasahan natin sa assessment task na ito? Ano ba ang roles of learners and the roles and guardians sa mga assessment task na ito? Ano ba ang procedure, paano ito gagawin, at ano ba yung mga expected timeline, at ano ba yung mga standards at ang mga rubrics. Doon tayo magkakaroon ng problema pag hindi natin na-communicate sa ating mga magulang kung ano ang ibig sabihin ng mga assessment na ito. Nang tatanungin yung mga schools during the monitoring, were you able to communicate to the parents about the distance learning delivery and its modality? Sinasabi at sinasagot oo. Ano ang na-communicate? Kadalasan ang na-communicate is yung delivery at ang retrieval at ang schedule. Ngayon, na-communicate ba sa mga magulang kung ano ang content at inaasahan sa bawat content ng module? Yun ang pinaka-importante na matutunan, o yun ang importante na ma-map out ng ating mga parents, kasi doon sa content ng ating module, doon ang gabay sa pagkatuto ng bata. Okay? Wala doon sa retrieval and delivery mechanism. There is no learning in the delivery and retrieval. There is no teaching in the delivery and retrieval. The teaching and learning will commence when both the parents and the teacher, both the parents and the learners understand the content and how the content will go through as it progress within the learning time of the learners. So yun yung gusto nating ma-communicate sa ating mga magulang, na maiintindihan nila na ang learning module na ito ay tulong doon sa kanilang mga anak para may matutunan ang mga bata. Okay? And the teacher also must consult the learners and when necessary the parents, guardians to allow room for adjustment and flexibilities need. Kailangan hindi lang tayo doon nakapunto o makafocus sa pagtatanong sa bata kung madali ba o mahirap sa kanila ang module or ang ating learning material. Kailangan ma-deepen natin doon sa bata, saan sa part ng ating mga module nahihirapan ang bata. Doon ba sa activity 1, doon ba sa activity 2, doon ba sa activity 3, doon ba sa pagbasa ng mga content sa ating mga modules, doon ba sa kanilang pag-intindi sa bawat item sa mga nagutan, o kung meron mang 5 items, saan doon sila nahihirapan, baka doon sa level na number 4 nahihirapan sila sa analysis part. And these are the things that we need to communicate with our learners. Minsan kasi pag binibisita natin yung ating mga bata, is natatakot ang ating mga bata kasi ang unang tanong natin is bakit hindi ka nakapag-submit ng module? That is what we call as the common mistake of giving questions. Okay? Yung pagdating pa lang ng ng guro doon sa bahay during the home visitation, sasabihin, kumusta? Anong ginagawa natin for the past days? Tapos tatanungin, bakit hindi ka nag-submit ng module? Or sasabihin, Dong, pumunta kasi ako dito, or Mother, pumunta kasi ako dito kasi hindi nakapag-submit ang bata ng module. That is a wrong question. Kasi that question will pose negative impact to the learners and to the parents. Ang akala nila napakalaking kasalanan na hindi sila nakapalit ng module. So these are the things also that we are going to refine to our teachers, the formative type of questioning, yung pagtatanong. So paano natin ma-communicate sa bata? Yung pagpunta natin doon is we are very friendly. Na chine-check natin o ang presence natin doon is a help for them, not a threat for them. Okay? Sana nung pagpunta natin, tinatanong natin kumusta, kung pagsagot natin sa mga modules, may mga items ba sa mga module na medyo mahirap? Kasi this is a way of leading them to understand teachers are there to help them. Kaya nagtatanong si teacher sa akin kung saan parte ng module medyo mahirap para i-communicate ko sa kanya at matulungan niya ako. Okay? So that's the way we are going to communicate formatively and provide feedback to our learners during this time. Okay? And we need to communicate this one to ourselves first, and to our parents, and to our learners. And feedback and remediation. This is very important. Okay? This is to benefit student learning, both formative and summative. So assessment must be accompanied with timely, constructive, and meaningful feedback. Nandyan palagi ang timely kasi kailangan nating ma-reach out agad ang bata on time para mabigyan ng feedback based on his progress or on his record of progress. And in giving feedback, teachers need to maximize available communication options. Marami tayong mga pamamaraan. So kung ano man yung mga angkop na pamamaraan doon sa pagbibigay natin ng feedback na both safety sa atin at sa ating mga learners, then probably we can use that one. So, feedback and remediation, ito yung hindi masyadong na-practice natin sa field, no? Consistent with DepEd Order number 8 series of 2015, teachers should ensure that learners receive remediation when they earn raw scores which are consistently below expectation in summative assessments by the 5th week of any quarter. Okay? So pag nakikita natin na sa pang-5 linggo, merong mga bata na mahihirapan talaga mag-crossover on the 6th and 7th to the 8th week. Kailangan on the 5th week doon magbigay na tayo ng remediation. Okay? So maaring itong mga learners natin na na-identify natin na very struggling in the first 5 weeks, stop muna doon ang pagbigay sa kanila ng modules. Yung mga independent instructional, continue giving them modules. But for those learners who consistently earn ratings below expectation on the 5th week, bigyan na natin ng remediation, and that is under the policy of assessment. Okay? Minsan kasi binibigyan natin ng remediation yung mga bata after the summative assessment in the grading period after 8 weeks. Okay? So doon pa lang sa 5th week, yung mga struggling learners natin, struggling readers, okay, bigyan na natin ng remediation activities. Bigyan na natin ng reinforcement, remediation, and enhancement. Para sigurado tayo na sa pagtatapos ngayon ng buong quarter, itong mga batang ito ay handang-handa na para mag-take ng ating final output or final activities or final summative assessment. When we allow the students, when we give students remediation in the 5th week, we will be preventing students from failing in any learning area at the end of the year. Anong sinasabi natin dito sa distance learning? Hindi lang tayo tira ng tira kung saan gusto nating tumira. Okay? Kailangan nating ma-analyze muna yung mga pagkakataon, kailangan ma-analyze muna natin yung ating mga bata bago tayo bigay sa kanila ng material. Okay? And that will happen only, the analysis will happen only when we religiously do formative assessment. So I may end up this session by saying learners need endless feedback than they need endless teaching. Mas gusto ng bata o mas may matutunan ang bata doon sa pagbigay natin ng feedback kaysa doon sa tinuturuan natin sila kung ano ang gusto natin na matutunan nila. So again, in the context of formative assessment, in the context of learning, feedback is more important than teaching. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'll be back later on for the rest of the sessions that I will be delivering to you. Good morning and good luck, and keep safe always in your respective places.